On tonight's summary of the Israel-Hamas war, day 172. One more Israeli hostage has reportedly died in captivity in the Gaza Strip. His body is currently being held by Hamas. The hostage negotiations are collapsing. Hamas gave its answer rejecting Israel's proposal yesterday. The Israeli delegation team has been recalled from Qatar, stating there is no way to move forward. The IDF published more high-profile arrests that occurred in Al-Shifa hospital in the Gaza Strip, and has confirmed that Marwan Issa, number 3 in Hamas's Gaza leadership, was assassinated 2 weeks ago. Major escalations between the IDF and Hezbollah. The group fired over 50 missiles and targets the main Israeli Air Force base in the northern parts of Israel. The IDF carried out a series of bombings deep throughout Lebanon. Diplomatic blows between Israeli government and the U.S. administration. Israel blamed the hostage deal collapsing on the passage of the UN Security Council resolution. The United States stated that such accusations are rhetorical distractions and the administration is the one that is focused on bringing the hostages home. Hello everyone, I'm Alon Burstein, visiting assistant professor in the Department of Political Science and Israel Institute Fellow at the University of California, Irvine, here bringing you the summary of the last 24 hours of the Israel-Hamas war. It's currently the evening of March 26, 2024 in the United States, the morning of March 27, 2024 in the Middle East. Starting with the hostage situation, the IDF announced that Uriel Baruch, a 35-year-old Israeli hostage, is confirmed dead. According to the message, he was killed while in captivity and his body is being held in the Gaza Strip. No details were given about how the IDF found this out or the circumstances in which he died. This brings the number of hostages that the IDF has stated are dead in the Gaza Strip to 36 hostages out of the 134 that are currently being negotiated. Other news, the hostage negotiations are beginning to collapse. After Hamas rejected Israel's answer in the negotiations, the head of the Mossad, Dedi Barnea, has recalled the entire Israeli delegation from Qatar, signaling the end of this round of negotiations. Sources added that based upon the negotiation red lines that were decided upon by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu for the Israeli delegation, it is clear that progress cannot be made at this time, and thus the team is returning since there's nothing to debate, given Hamas's response and their current position. Responding to this, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's office stated, and I quote, "Hamas's position shows that it does not want to deal, and is an unfortunate testimony to the damage of the UN Security Council resolution." That refers to the resolution that was passed yesterday that the United States abstained and let a resolution calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip to pass. If you want more information of that, check out my report from yesterday. The statement continued, stating that Hamas is still adhering to its original demands of ending the war, IDF withdrawal, and allowing complete freedom of movement within the Gaza Strip in order so that it can remain in power, adding, Hamas refused the U.S. compromise and welcomed the UN Security Council resolution. Israel will not surrender to Hamas's absurd demands and will continue to operate to achieve the goals of the war, releasing all hostages, destroying Hamas's military and governing capabilities, and ensuring that Gaza is no longer a threat to Israel. So that was the response of Israel's Prime Minister Netanyahu's office. Responding to this, the U.S. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller stated that Netanyahu's statements are both untrue and unfair towards the hostages and their families, adding that Hamas's answer was prepared in advance prior to the resolution in the UN Security Council, and stating, "We are not going to focus on rhetorical distractions about this. We plan on continuing to work in order to try to bring the hostages home." In addition to this, the Qatari foreign minister's spokesperson, Majid al-Ansari, tried later in the day to downplay the meeting of the negotiations collapsing, stating that technical deliberations between the negotiating sides are continuous and ongoing, adding that there's no time frame for the talks, in other words, the delegations can leave and come back, and that the Israeli delegation has not yet left Qatar. At this moment, Qatar and Egypt and the United States are probably going to try to come up with another formula to get the parties to again return to talks, but right now, negotiations have officially collapsed and the sides are not talking to each other. As the foreign ministry in Qatar stated, there are still technical teams that may continue to talk to each other, but there's no actual negotiations about a framework for a hostage deal. Other news related to the hostage situation. In the New York Times interview today, Amit Susanna, who is a 40-year-old Israeli woman who had been held captive in the Gaza Strip and was released in the hostage deal of November, exposed a story today of sexual assaults that she had experienced during her captivity from one of her captors. I'm going to spare people and not bring the details about what the interview says, but from a news perspective, it is important to know that this is the first time that one of the freed hostages has made public the sexual assaults and abuse that she experienced during her captivity. She called upon the Israeli government to do everything possible to release the hostages as fast as possible at any price that is necessary, because they are likely experiencing these types of assaults. Other news related to the hostage situation: Ruby Chen, who is a U.S.-Israeli citizen and the father of an IDF soldier who was killed on October 7th and his body is held in the Gaza Strip, stated today that a White House representative called the family members of U.S.-Israeli hostages and informed them that the U.S. policy towards Israel and the situation has not changed despite the political upheaval of the last several days, adding that the United States did not veto the UN Security Council resolution because it included in it a direct demand for immediate release of all hostages. Chen specifically compared this to the lack of meeting and calls from the Israeli government in over 3.5 months. Moving on to the Gaza Strip, there were no rockets or mortars that were fired from the Gaza Strip towards Israel in the last 24 hours. Regarding the fighting in the Gaza Strip, the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the IDF operation in Al-Shifa Hospital continues. Gun battles were reported in different compounds as the IDF is continuing to sweep through the different buildings in order to search them for weaponry and possible suspects. In other regions of the northern parts of the Gaza Strip, the Al-Qassam brigades reported hitting IDF vehicles with Yasin 105 missiles in Al-Rashid Street. This is in the region of Tel al-Halawa of Gaza City. The group reported that it could not confirm casualties, however it did observe that some of the vehicles were hit. In addition to this, the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari published more information about 3 more high-profile arrests that occurred in Al-Shifa Hospital in the last week. These include Radwan Yunus Kamal Tapash. He is a Palestinian Islamic Jihad commander and a person in charge of rocket and weaponry production for the movement. Hashem Muhammad, he's a Hamas operative and a deputy leader of finances for the entire movement. And Bahar Ahmed Bahar Kanita, he's a division head of security in Hamas's Gaza City units. Among others, these units were in charge of the civil administration and Hamas governance and security within the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. In addition, Hagari confirmed the successful assassination of Marwan Issa. This is Muhammad Def's deputy and number 3 in Hamas's Gaza command. According to reports, the attack took place over 2 weeks ago in al-Nusrat refugee camp. While it has been rumored up until now that Issa was killed, it had not been confirmed either by the IDF or by Hamas until now. Now the IDF is confirming it. In addition, the Hagari stated that Razi Abu Tama'a, who is a former head of the central camps for Hamas and a senior figure in Al-Qassam brigades in charge of weapons and other matters, was also killed in that same attack, again in al-Nusrat refugee camp. Hamas in turn put out a statement stating that the IDF report about Issa's death is unsubstantiated, adding that the timing of the announcement is meant to cover up Netanyahu's political crises. Moving on to the southern parts of the Gaza Strip, in Han Yunis, the IDF operation in Al Amal neighborhood continues. Several different units were reportedly active within the area, and substantial gun battles were reported and major weaponry was uncovered thus far in the neighborhood. Airstrikes were also reported throughout the day in the area, and it's important to note that Al Amal is adjacent to the Al Muasi refugee camp, that is the main humanitarian zone in the Gaza Strip. So while the IDF is carrying out this operation in Al Amal, it remains to be seen if it ends up affecting the humanitarian zone. The Palestinian Red Crescent reported that the Al Amal hospital has been completely evacuated and has stopped functioning after all patients and medical staff were forced to evacuate and the entrances to the hospital were blocked. There were also reports later in the day stating that IDF tanks are surrounding the Nasser hospital in Han Yunis. The IDF had operated in Han Yunis several months ago, possibly like Al-Shifa hospital. The IDF is now planning to re-enter these different hospitals. Remains to be seen. In Rafah, there were reports of bombings that were carried out, which are becoming a daily event. In the last several days, there have been reports almost every day of substantial bombings in the southern city. A building reportedly housing 3 families was attacked, with local sources stating that 18 people were killed, including 9 children. The IDF did not make any comments regarding what was the target of this attack, or who they were trying to kill, and was that successful. Other news related to the Gaza Strip. The IDF published recordings from some of the interrogations of Palestinians who were arrested in Al-Shifa hospital. In the interrogations, they shed some light on what Hamas has been doing in the compound. Some of them state that there are 600 to 1,000 operatives within Al-Shifa compound, and some of them are still hiding out. 2 of them that were reported upon is Nabil Regev Abu Ashtiwi. He is shown here on the right side of the picture. Reportedly, he was involved in manufacturing rockets for the Palestinian Islamic Jihad. In his interrogation, he stated that he was in Al-Shifa for 3 months already, repeatedly calling the hospital the safe haven. In addition, as I stated earlier, Bahar Ahmed Bahar Kanita, shown here on the left, is a Hamas operative who was in charge of the defense sectors of Gaza City. He stated that he was in Al-Shifa for over a month, adding that there was no specific headquarters within Al-Shifa, rather operatives had spread throughout the different areas of the compound wherever there was spare room. He added that the access to water and electricity and the constant movement of people in and out of the facility and the protection that hospitals get as humanitarian zones are all reasons that the movements set up in the hospital. Regarding casualties in the last 24 hours, the IDF did not report any IDF soldiers killed or injured in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This leaves the total number of IDF soldiers killed in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 252, and the total number of IDF soldiers injured in the Gaza Strip since the invasion began on 1,509. The Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip is reporting that 81 Palestinians were killed in the Gaza Strip in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of Palestinians killed in the Gaza Strip since the war began to 32,414. In addition to this, 74,787 Palestinians are reported injured in the Gaza Strip since the war began. I remind everyone that the IDF does not put out its own figures about how many Palestinians are killed in the Gaza Strip. The last time the IDF put out figures about how many militants were killed in the Gaza Strip, both of Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and in general anyone who is armed, it's stated that it was upwards of 13,000 people who have been killed in the Gaza Strip, so possibly this is 13,000 out of the 32,000. Moving on to the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, Hamas's communications ministry reported that 18 Palestinians were killed today in failed paradropping missions when parachutes did not open when aid was dropped, and that in addition 12 Palestinians drowned when they were trying to retrieve aid that landed at sea, and 6 more Palestinians died as a result of crushing conditions trying to get to aid. I bring this report, but it's important to note that this was not reported by the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip, whose figures I tend to report and consider relatively accurate. In turn, it was reported by the Communications Ministry in the Gaza Strip, which is known to be far less accurate and does not rely on actual hospital reports, but rather is seen as more of a propaganda arm for Hamas. The ministry also ended, "We hold the U.S. administration and the Israeli occupation responsible for the hunger and siege in the Gaza Strip." Nonetheless, different news agencies did report that several Palestinians had been killed as a result of paradropping missions and parachutes not opening, so I do bring this report, but again I add, it is not reported by the Palestinian Health Ministry in the Gaza Strip. In addition to this, the IDF reported that 258 aid trucks entered the Gaza Strip today carrying food, water, and medical supplies, specifically citing that 166 of them were carrying over 7 million pounds of food. In addition, 125 aid packages were reportedly paradropped throughout the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. It was not reported specifically which countries participated in the paradropping missions, nor from which mission is it possible that the parachutes did not open. Moving on to the West Bank, there was substantial IDF activity that was reported in several different parts of the West Bank in the last 24 hours. Among these, IDF activity alongside Shabak units were reported in the areas of Beit Omar near Hebron, from where fire was shot yesterday towards an Israeli settlement in the region. Weaponry was uncovered and confiscated in this operation. Other IDF activity was also reported in the areas of Beit Fajar village, the village of Mazara and Obani, Gilazon refugee camp, Tulkarem, Tubas, and Balata refugee camp near Nablus, where confrontations erupted and reportedly one Palestinian was shot and injured. The IDF reported that a total of 14 Palestinians were arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. The Palestinian Prisoners Society, in turn, reported that at least 30 Palestinians were arrested in the West Bank in the last 24 hours. In addition, right before recording this, the IDF announced launching a major division-wide operation in the Kabatia refugee camp. This is in the area near Jenin. Confrontations were already reported in the area and 2 Palestinians were injured. I will have more details about this in my summary tomorrow. Moving on to the northern parts of Israel and southern parts of Lebanon, there were major escalations throughout the last 24 hours between the IDF and Hezbollah. Regarding the quote-unquote regular activity between the sides, Hezbollah fired rockets and missiles towards the areas of Hanita in the western Galilee, Shtula, Shomra, Avivim, there was a direct hit of a missile causing a fire to break out in a vineyard, and Batzat, there was also a direct hit in a house. Hezbollah also claimed several different border incidents throughout the day. Regarding IDF activity, IDF warplanes attacked weapons warehouses in the areas of Hanin, and Hezbollah infrastructures in the areas of Beit Yahun. Other attacks were also targeted military structures and infrastructure in the areas of Itash Ab and Kila, and Hezbollah lookout post was also attacked in the areas of Misr Jabal. There were also attacks reported in the areas of Marun Aras, and Al Manar reported attacks in the Hula village, as well, and El Mian also reported that there was artillery fire in Tir Herfa. In addition to these barrages, Hezbollah also launched a barrage of rockets, again targeting the IDF Air Force Base in the areas of Meron. In response, a wide range of unusual attacks were carried out deep in Lebanon by the IDF, with IDF officials officially stating that the military is in fact expanding its range of fire and retaliations throughout Lebanon. Among these, an airstrike was reported deep in the northeastern parts of Lebanon in the El Harmel region, north of Baalbek. This is the farthest into Lebanon that the IDF has attacked since the war began, some 120 kilometers north of the border. The IDF reported that the attack took place in the town of Zavod, and that warplanes targeted a Hezbollah military compound associated with the movement's air force. Similar attacks were also reported in the areas of Tel Vardin. The IDF stated that this attack was specifically in retaliation to Hezbollah's attack against the base in Mount Meron. In addition to this, the Lebanese Al Jadid reported that a truck was attacked in the areas of Wadi Anira, this is between El Harmel and Baalbek. Other attacks were also reported in the areas of Budai, west of Baalbek. Al Arabi reported that several people were injured in that attack, which according to Al Akhbar targeted a house in the area. In response to all these, Hezbollah fired a major barrage of over 50 rockets simultaneously, targeting the entire Upper Galilee. These included the areas of Gadot, Tuba Zagaria, Ayelet HaShachar, Rosh Pina, Mevot Chermon, as well as Katzrin and the Golan Heights. Some of these rockets were intercepted, others landed in open areas. Hezbollah stated this was a retaliation to the El Harmel attack. Finally, towards dawn in the Middle East, Lebanese sources reported a major IDF attack in the El Habara region. This is in southern Lebanon. Al-Miadin stated that the attack targeted the Islamic Medical Group. This is an arm of Hezbollah's social service network, and sources stated that 7 people were killed in this attack. In addition to all these, the Lebanese Al-Nahar newspaper reported today about an unusual confrontation that erupted in the Ramish region of southern Lebanon when a Hezbollah unit tried to set up rocket launchers in the vicinity of a Christian town in the area. Youths from the town reportedly confronted the units of Hezbollah and shots were fired in the air. Some of the youths reportedly ran to the church and rang the church bells, leading people to come out, and Hezbollah units eventually withdrawing. Al-Miadin reported with regards to casualties that a Palestinian Islamic Jihad operative was killed in Lebanon, his name is Ahmed Mahmoud, in these different attacks. Hezbollah also announced the deaths of 3 more of its operatives throughout the day, bringing the total number of operatives that Hezbollah states were killed since the war began to 251. In addition to all this, there were also major attacks that were reported throughout the day in Syria. Substantial rounds of attacks were carried out in the areas of Deir ez-Zor and Bukhma regions. The IDF stated that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard targets and sites that were utilized for weapons trafficking were the targets of these attacks. The Syrian Human Rights Observatory gave details about the targets, stating that in the town of El Miadin, a farm region was targeted. In the El Bukhma region, 2 command centers were hit. In El Abbas, headquarters were attacked, and in Deir ez-Zor, a villa was targeted. 17 people were reportedly killed in these different attacks. 16 of them are reportedly members of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, and one of them is a Syrian engineer. One of those who was killed is Bahroz Wahidi. He's an advisor or a member, depending on which source is reporting on his death, of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, who reportedly is at the rank of lieutenant colonel and in charge of communications for the organization. The Syrian Human Rights Observatory also reported that of those who were killed, 9 are Iraqi citizens and 2 are Syrian citizens who were working with the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, adding that 31 people were injured, of them 21 were activists in pro-Iranian militias. It was also stated in their report that the attacks in Deir ez-Zor came several hours after a cargo plane from Iran landed in the Deir ez-Zor airport with Iranian Revolutionary Guards personnel and equipment that were unloading, including communications devices and optical gear. Both Al-Miadin and the Syrian regime initially stated that the United States is the one who carried out these attacks. However, the United States denied this, and later the IDF stated that the military is in fact the one who carried out attacks in Syria. Some of the regional developments for the last 24 hours, Houthi spokesperson Yahya Saria stated that the Houthis have carried out 6 operations in the past 72 hours using both nautical ballistic missiles and drones. He added that in 4 of them, an American ship and a British ship were attacked in the Red Sea, that a military operation was carried out against 2 U.S. destroyers, and several Israeli targets in the southern Israeli town of Eilat were also targeted. He added that our military operations achieved their goals. I will say that there have been no reports in the United States or in Israel of successful attacks that the Houthis carried out, so it's possible that by achieve their goals, he means that they actually succeeded in carrying out the attack rather than in actually causing any damage. However, this statement comes amidst the fact that the Houthis did pledge to escalate their attacks during Ramadan. Possibly this is what the Houthis are calling their escalation, or this is beginning a round of escalations that we'll see in the coming days. Moving on to some of the political and general trends for the last 24 hours, Ismail Haniyeh, who is the external leader of Hamas and technically the leader of the entire movement, although the internal leadership, Yahya Sinwar, has taken much more control, is currently visiting Iran. He met with the Iranian Foreign Minister Hussein Amir Abdullahian, stating that the UN Security Council resolution that was passed is an example of Israel's unprecedented political isolation, adding that this is a critical time for the resistance and a turning point. In addition, Haniyeh met in Tehran with Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Khamenei stated to him that Iran will never hesitate to assist Palestine or Gaza in particular. At the same time, the leader of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Ziad Nahaleh, also arrived in Iran and is meeting with different officials there. He stated upon his arrival, I quote, "We will break Israel and defeat it with Islam, the Quran, and Iran's support for the Palestinian people." Meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant met with the United States Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin in Washington, D.C. He stated at the beginning of their meeting that at the same time of their meeting is happening, the Hamas leaders are in a meeting with the Iran leadership across the world, and that there is no greater example of the war of the free world against the axis of terrorism. U.S. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin emphasized at the beginning of the meeting the humanitarian situation in the Gaza Strip, calling it a catastrophe and stating that protecting Palestinian civilians is both a moral and a strategic obligation. During their meeting, the two reportedly discussed a range of topics, including the hostage situation, the fighting in the Gaza Strip and long-term strategies, the humanitarian situation and increasing humanitarian aid, and strengthening the security and strategic ties between the countries, specifically with regards to weapons purchases. I remind everyone that before heading to the United States, it was reported that Israel's Minister of Defense, Yoav Gallant, intends on discussing the IDF's request to buy new F-35s, F-15s, and helicopters from the United States. Other political news, Colombian President Gustavo Petro stated that if Israel does not abide by the UN Security Council resolution, Colombia is going to suspend its relations with the country. He added that he calls upon the entire world to put pressure on Israel to abide by the resolution, and if not, to take diplomatic actions. It's important to note that Petro has been a consistent critic of Israel's actions since the war began. And finally, Germany's foreign minister, who is due to visit the region in the coming days, stated that the situation in Gaza Strip is akin to hell, calling upon the entrance of as much humanitarian aid into the Gaza Strip as possible. If you find these reports important, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. That is my report for the last 24 hours. I'll be back tomorrow.